I love that USL has decided to do this precisely because it is big and bold and arrogant. Hello, Sunshine. I'm Alexi, Lalas, and welcome to the State of the Union podcast, where we look at the beautiful game on and off the field through the lens of red, white, and blue-colored glasses. This show will be talking, USL's seismic plans, Captain McKennie, Super Sub Pulisic, Weah's work, more mutant gene, Paxton, Gio, Black Hawk Down, USA versus Mexico soccer versus USA versus Canada hockey, new MLS jerseys, Professor Lalas, and so much more. But first, joining me as always, my friend, my colleague, my guiding light, David Mosse, a soccer savant and a Fox soccer researcher and writer extraordinaire. Mosse, how are you doing on this Monday, February 17th in the year 2025?
I'm doing well, adapting to this more intimate setting.
Yes. For those that watch the show, you will find that we are in one of the different sets. We are in a sitting position as opposed to behind our traditional desk. There is a lot of production that is going on here and will be going on here for the foreseeable future. And I'm talking about months, which means that we're going to have to move around. We'll still have plenty of, weekly content when it comes to the State of the Union, but where we are performing and broadcasting from will change over the next couple of weeks and then over the next couple of months, and then we will return everything because they are doing some construction down at one of the big studios, which means that a lot of the studio shows that we do on the linear side are having to move, and because they've done such a wonderful job up here in our digital studios, they said, hey, that looks good. Let's take over that for a little bit. So we will adjust. We are nothing if not part of a team here, and we will adjust. Mosse, have you watched anything interesting or seen anything interesting or read anything interesting?
I have so much today. I'm actually going to split it up between the opening segment and the closing segment. I did watch the premiere of season 3 of The White Lotus. I enjoyed it. I liked the show despite what Kyla says. And by the way, Kyla Morris, last Monday, one of the all-time bearing the leads. Right before we started taping, she informed us that she had started binging The White Lotus, watched the first few episodes, gave us her review. I mentioned it on the air. And then after the show, I was talking to Kyle and Jack in the edit bay, and she very casually mentions that she also started binging The Wire.
What? Even I know that. Even I watched The Wire.
For my money, the greatest TV drama of all time. Right, so I'll be very curious to hear Kyla's take on that show.
Well, unless she's going to do it 24/7, we got a little time before she's going to give us her final, review of it. Okay, so you had all sorts of stuff, evidently, that you've been watching, so much so that you were going to keep some for later on in the pod. I only have a couple of things. And I know that you had mentioned this, I think, last week. Surviving Black Hawk Down, which is a new documentary that's out on Netflix. And I thought they did an incredible job. I think it's 3 episodes. I thought they did an incredible job. Many of you have seen the movie, maybe other documentaries. Many of you know the story about these Black Hawk helicopters in Somalia that came down in Mogadishu, in the Battle of Mogadishu at that point. And it was just a you-know-what show from start to finish. And I thought they did a really good job in explaining the backstory and then obviously explaining what happened. And, this perilous fight from these Americans, and many that were shot down, and then many that were actually brought in to save the people that were shot down. And again, the way that they got people to talk about it, those that survived, but then also the other side, the Somali militants there, they got people, whether they were actually fighting against the Americans there or were kind of bystanders, although involved. I mean, they have one of the characters in this is a videographer who has incredible footage, but also an incredible story to tell about getting that footage. So I just thought A+, I thought it was great.
And credit where credit's due. This was a Sean Sullivan recommendation to both of us. A very good one. Yeah, I enjoyed it. It made me think of the book Beirut that you and I both read. Another instance of U.S. Marines being placed in a very difficult situation. I also watched this Apple TV documentary, Vietnam, the War That Changed America. So I've had ill-advised U.S. military excursions on the brain lately.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we forget that initially we, and when I say we, it was in cooperation with UN, and there were people from all sorts of different countries went in there because of the famine that was going on, because of the Civil War. And, sometimes you put yourself in a situation with all of the best intentions, and then it goes to hell in a handbasket, as it did here. And it should be noted that to this day, that country is on, the list of one of the poorest in the world with the most problems, and that civil war continues to exist in there. So ultimately, lives were lost. You can say needlessly, and we can argue that back and forth. But ultimately, the story of that day and what happened, and I was just amazed that I get there's a fog of war, and it's easy from our chairs here, Mosse, to say, "Oh, this should have been done. This should have been done." But with the power that the U.S. military has, the helplessness in that moment that comes across in these interviews from the people that were there, it was sad, but it was also almost shameful that this happened. That accidents happen in war. I mean, that happens, but the ability to extricate them in a admittedly perilous type of situation. But you kept saying, well, where's the cavalry? Why isn't this happening now? And it never came, and they were oftentimes left to their own devices.
On a lighter note, can I bring up one more thing?
Yes.
I gobbled up all the SNL 50-year anniversary stuff this weekend. On Saturday night, there was a 3-hour look back at all the musical performances in SNL history. And then on Sunday night, they did a special 3-hour show with sketches and monologues and all the old cast members being back there. Truth be told, I'm not a big SNL guy. It was never appointment viewing for me. I never found it that funny, but I do respect the history of it and what an institution it is. And it got me thinking, after the 94 World Cup, you were famous enough. You did all the late night talk shows where you could have hosted SNL. Was that ever a possibility?
Yeah, I mean, there have been athletes in the past that have hosted, obviously a lot more high profile. But to your point, what had happened in that summer, I think it probably could have warranted it. I mean, everyone was kind of focused on it, and the way that I looked and all that kind of stuff. It could have happened, but I don't think it ever came. Well, I know it didn't across because I would have jumped at it. I would have said absolutely. Alas, it didn't happen. It's SNL's loss or NBC's loss. I too watched a lot of it. I thought the music one was really interesting because a lot of times incredible performances happened, or bands broke even bigger than they normally would have been on. So it was literally a great stage for them to be on. I thought it was interesting, the juxtaposition between the different genres. For example, you had Miley Cyrus and stuff, and at one point Devo came on, so it was all over the map, which is the way that they kind of want to do it. The audience was incredible, especially in last night's 3-hour one. Just the star-studded audience. I mean, every single seat was occupied by somebody that either directly or indirectly was connected to the show, and just a who's who of Hollywood and the entertainment world. Shall we light this candle, my friend? Oh, wait, I forgot one more thing, because I mentioned two things in terms of it. And I will talk about this later, but I just started the book, The Looming Tower, which, to your point, is actually a look back at how Al-Qaeda came to be, and the history of all of that. And I didn't realize that on Hulu there is an episodal drama of that book. I think it's 10 episodes or something like that. It was done years ago. Jeff Daniels is the lead in that, so I'm looking forward to watching that.
I've read the book.
There you go.
Very good. Highly recommend.
There you go. Yeah. All right, now should we light this candle?
Let's do it.
If anybody is still left that hasn't turned off after our intro. All right, where should we start?
We're going to begin with some massive news in American soccer that broke late last week. The USL is planning to launch a first division league in 2027. Right now, we have the USL Championship, which is Division 2, and then USL League 1, which is Division 3. The only top flight league is MLS, but that looks like it could change come 2027. They have to obtain first division sanctioning from U.S. Soccer. The requirements are you have to have at least 12 teams. They each have to play in stadiums with at least 15,000 capacity, and 75% of the teams have to be in markets with a population of at least 1 million people. Paul McDonough, who seems to be the head of this enterprise, he claims that so far U.S. soccer has been supportive of the idea, but they have to get their ducks in a row and prove the viability of it. He said it would be a spring to fall calendar, and he did not say there would be promotion relegation, but everybody's assuming there would be between the 3 USL leagues I mentioned, to contrast with MLS. What say you?
I'm glad we're starting to show off with this, because I think that this is big news. And I think it's big, bold, arrogant in the most positive way, and audacious type of thinking. And it just plays right into everything that I've said now for a number of years relative to 2026 coming. If not now, when? I love that USL has decided to do this precisely because it is big and bold and arrogant. To your point, I hope that they qualify for the Division I sanctioning and the professional league standards that we've talked about for a long time. And I've often said that if they are restrictive or punitive in nature, that's a problem, okay? Because the United States Soccer Federation, which has these standards and therefore applies the sanctioning, their U.S. Soccer's mandate, last time I checked, is to spread the gospel of soccer and do things that are good for soccer. Now, I'm not talking about things that are protecting players and protecting security, but again, you mentioned the requirement of the stadium size. Well, last I checked, over in the EPL right now, there's a stadium for, what's one of the smaller teams or whatever? I have to look it up. It's like 15,000 or something like that. Why does stadium size matter? Why does market size matter? Now, amenities and making sure that players are safe, making sure that ownership has net worth, I think that's important. You don't want fly-by-night types of entities or individuals and owners that are in charge, because then men and women on and off the field lose their job. So I think, like I said, I hope that they get the Division I sanctioning from U.S. Soccer, because the reality is, Mosse, that the more soccer, the better. And there is plenty of room for other leagues. Competition that is going to ensue on and off the field is a good thing. It's good in business, and this is a business. I think this is a good thing. This also helps show that there is nothing stopping anyone from trying to build a better mousetrap, something that I've said forever. And, as it relates to pro-rel, we'll see if that's part of the component. If it is, great. If it isn't, fine. But also, going back to the sanctioning, let's be honest. I don't think that people are going to watch soccer relative to what the league sanction is, if it's Division I, Division II. It also should be noted that in the past, we have had multiple division sanctions of 2 leagues having Division II, having Division I. Right now, when it comes to the women's game, we have 2 Division I leagues. So the more the merrier. I think that this is great news. And finally, I'll say this, Mosse. This also highlights and almost forces MLS to do big, bold things. And if that's ultimately all that comes out of this, I'm good with that. So this is good stuff, like I said.
Well, I mentioned the spring to fall calendar. Everybody is writing that would mean they'd be competing head-on with MLS, but there are reports that MLS is looking into shifting to the European calendar after the 26 World Cup, so they might not be competing head-to-head in terms of the schedule. But let me just play devil's advocate. You say it's a good thing, and I understand the reasons why, but you also have said that American soccer eats its own. And instead of having everybody working towards one American soccer league being the best in the world, are you worried about a watering down effect where all the best players, coaches, execs, soccer minds in this country might be split between 2 different leagues?
Yeah, so a brain drain type of thing, or at least like you said, a spreading out. No, I'm not worried about that. And specifically, it comes down to the size and the geography of our country. And I've said this before. Why would I ever want to stand in the way of insert whatever market it is being involved in soccer? MLS, even going into its 30th year with its 30th team about to come online in San Diego, still can't cover the masses, still can't cover the talent that exists, and still can't give everybody out there from a local perspective or even a regional perspective a team of their own. So I think because of the size of our country and because of the soccer culture that exists, some that is evident and some that just is there to be mined or discovered. Yeah, I think the more leagues that we have, the better. Now, when it comes to the promotion relegation element of this, as you mentioned, they didn't necessarily have this as part of it. It may or may not be going forward, but I will reiterate, nothing is stopping anybody from implementing promotion relegation within a league or within an agreed upon group of leagues. Now, I know out there for many people, especially for the zealots out there, that's not authentic and traditional when it comes to the promotion relegation. But if it really is this silver bullet, then the market will decide. The customer out there will decide and say, this is so much better than anything we've had before.
The thing I would say about that is you need that Division I league to be really successful and really prestigious, because for promotion relegation to succeed, you need that ultimate carrot on the stick and to it really feel like a big deal for a smaller club to get to that highest level. The issue right now is MLS is so much bigger than any other soccer league in the United States. And as long as it's walled off from everybody else and not part of promotion relegation, you feel like, well, you're not really getting to the highest level if you get promoted all the way to the first division. But maybe this USL league will be successful enough where it will feel that.
Yeah, but why can't, if it is so wrong what MLS is doing, why wouldn't this be looked at as a good thing in that it has the potential to isolate MLS and literally make it go extinct in terms of what they do. A couple other things. When it comes, it should be also noted that the professional league standards have nothing to do with the quality of play on the field in terms of assessing if this league is going to be good. There's not a word about how good the soccer is on the field. I know that is subjective. And while I mentioned that I don't think fans particularly care or think about what the sanctioning is of a league, players care, especially players coming outside, and the market for soccer is global. So players care that they are coming to a first division, if you will. Coaches, I think that they ultimately care. And for an emerging business like USL that wants to engage in the global market, I think that will matter. And I hope that U.S. Soccer, and I don't think that this would happen, will not stand in the way and, again, be punitive or make it restrictive for USL to be sanctioned Division I. And then let's go, baby. Let's go. Let's see if you can coexist, because we have seen in the past, Mosse, businesses that have come along and built a better mousetrap. Some of them existed before, like, for example, a Netflix. They fundamentally changed the industry and changed the way they did business and reap the benefits. Someone like Nike came along when Adidas existed, and not only did they change the industry, but they were able to coexist. Someone like Amazon completely came along and destroyed the industry and sits basically alone right now. I don't know ultimately if this is ever going to happen from a USL perspective, but I'm here for it, in that I want to see it happen, and I don't think it's as problematic as people make it out to be.
I do recommend everybody should watch the 30 for 30 on the USFL, which in the 80s tried to compete with the NFL. They signed Herschel Walker and Steve Young, among others. Donald Trump owned the team.
Mm-hmm.
I found that to be a very entertaining 30 for 30. And more recently, we had the XFL, which was covered in that Vince McMahon documentary. We have the UFL, which we televise here on Fox. So at least with football, there have been some competing leagues. And for old school baseball fans will know that before Major League Baseball expanded out west, you had the Pacific Coast League, which is where Ted Williams and Joe DiMaggio started their careers. And then eventually Major League Baseball expanded out west and absorbed it. It's now become part of the minor league system. So yeah, you do have these stories across American sports history of rival leagues.
And who knows, when all is said and done, it may follow some of the history when it comes to sports, in that MLS may acquire USL. They may say, hey, you are doing some good things, and we actually recognize the quality of your business, and we want to fold it in. And it goes back to your point about we eat our own, and the soccer wars with a Z that continue on. And some of that is bad, as I've talked about, but not all of it is bad. And again, competition is good, both on and off the field. And if this lights a fire under MLS to do big, bold things, especially relative to 2026, that is a good thing. It's a good thing for those involved, but it's a good thing overall for soccer.
And by the way, another MLS season is upon us. We'll talk about it more on Wednesday. And MLS is having a crazy offseason in terms of incoming transfers, outgoing, and then transfers within MLS. There's cash for players. You talk about doing something bold. I mean, this Lucho Acosta to Dallas, Evander to Cincinnati. It's been crazy.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to talk a little later this week, and hopefully we're getting our good friend Taylor Twellman to come on the show here and give us a preview of 2025. But you mentioned the Evander thing. I woke up this morning, I'm driving in, and I come to find out that Evander, or not even arguably, I think the best player for Portland last year, gets sold in the new transfer way that MLS has created for $12 million.
Yeah,
that seems like a lot of money. But I'm actually here for it because it's kind of making the market and legitimizing this new way of doing business intra MLS.
Breaking news today: Santi Rodriguez is off to Botafogo in Brazil for $17 million.
Good. I mean, these are good things. Big numbers relative to MLS players, whether it's intra MLS or within leagues in South America or Europe and stuff like that. That is a good thing because it signifies quality and it gives you relevance and value, obviously. All right, Mosse, where should we go to now?
Another eventful weekend in Europe with Americans primarily involved. We'll begin with the big one in Serie A. Juventus claimed a 1-0 home win over Inter in the Derby d'Italia. Francisco Conceição scored the only goal, assisted by Randall Colomuani. McKennie and Weah both started. McKennie in the midfield, Weah right back. And Weah caught your attention for his work rate defensively.
Yeah, a lot to talk about here. I just wanted to highlight this defensive work. And look, I know that Weah is now kind of playing a right back type of position, and so it's his job to get back. But his tracking back to make a tackle, save a goal, I love it. Now, again, keep in mind that Tim Weah, notwithstanding the fact that he was, the architect of the demise of the U.S. men's national team in last year's Copa America and ultimately got Greg Berhalter fired, I think that Tim Weah over the last cycle has been the most consistent attacking player for the U.S. men's national team. I prefer him as more of a right winger, especially when you talk about the front three. I'm not saying he can't play in the right side in a back four, and the right side certainly in a back five. I just prefer him as a winger. But that he's getting on the field and that he's showing in that moment that he is willing to work back. You should show that clip to everybody and certainly show it to all your attacking players that, roll their eyes and scoff and pout and do all the different things that attacking players often do when they didn't get the pass or somebody looked them off or the pass was cut out. He got back and he did his job. And in doing so, he endears himself, obviously, to those of us on the outside, fans, people watching, but also to his teammates, that he is willing to do what amounts to some really dirty work. And while it wasn't a goal and it wasn't a highlight type of moment, I did want to highlight Tim Weah in that moment. He's much more than just that moment, but it exemplifies the way that he is playing that position and obviously the player that he is. But there's a lot more to talk about when it comes to this team.
Next up for Juventus, they are away to PSV in the Champions League, looking to protect a 2-1 first leg lead. Remember, Weston McKennie scored a great goal in that first leg. AC Milan this past weekend, 1-0 home win over Verona. Santi Jimenez with the goal. That's 2 in 2 games for him in Serie A. Yunus Musa started. Christian Pulisic did not. He came on as a sub in the second half.
So I remember last week, the guys were yelling at me over there on the X machine about not highlighting Santi Jimenez. All right, so I'll start it out with Santi. Well done. Congratulations. Bravo. Okay, muy bien, my friend. And it's a great start for him. And again, we had talked about Milan in the window really improving in terms of the players that they got in. So this is great. I'm not worried about the fact that Christian Pulisic is not starting. I think it's a nice rest for him, and it should be said also Lalas is not starting, and so that's a pretty nice bench of firepower to be able to look to. Ultimately, if this was the most important game, I think Christian Pulisic is starting for this team, but he still showed that when he comes on the field, good things happen.
I agree with you, but the Pulisic discourse on social media has been interesting the last few days. No matter how well American player does, no matter how well he's treated, U.S. fans are always waiting for the other shoe to drop and for that anti-American bias to creep in. And the fact that he was the first attacking player subbed out against Feyenoord in the first leg last week and didn't start this game, you're already seeing some murmurs of like, well, Milan have a Portuguese coach now in Sergio Conceição, and Rafael Leão and João Felix are both Portuguese, so he's going to show favoritism to them, and Pulisic is going to pay the price for that. You also have a prominent Mexican player in the mix, so now you have Mexican fans watching AC Milan games who are prone to criticize Pulisic's performances. So there's now a little bit of a weird energy in this AC Milan Pulisic social media discourse.
Yeah, I mean, suck it up, Buttercup. I mean, as an American player, you realize that there always is going to be an element. But I don't think and I'm not talking about the Dempseys and those types of players, but in the current era, I don't think that there is anybody more so than Christian Pulisic, and I think Weston McKennie, that have not completely, but have taken that attitude that you're an American, that all kind of, it's just baggage, it follows you everywhere, and the biases, whether they're admitted or not, that come with that, and have not completely thrown it away, but done a lot to dissolve that. And I do think that there is a recognition that they have become great players. I'm talking about Weston McKennie and Christian Pulisic, that just happen to be American as opposed to great American players.
AC Milan will look to overturn a 1-0 deficit against Feyenoord at home this week. We move to the English Championship. I'm going to group these two together. Josh Sargent scored again for Norwich in their 1-1 draw away to Hull City. That's 5 goals in 5 games for him. While Daryl Dike came on as a sub for West Brom in their 1-1 draw away to Millwall. His first appearance since February of 2024 as he rehabs from another ACL injury.
Yeah, and he got this goal, and this just shows you what the incredible mental fortitude that this player has. I like to think it's because of the mutant gene, but the reality is that at a time when a squirrel had come on the field and was running and taking all of the attention, and obviously could have confused the players on the field. No. Ball came in, and Josh Sargent does what he's been doing better than anybody, and certainly better than any American. Put the ball in the back of the net. And this bodes well for him when it comes to the national team and the camps coming up. And I love the fact that he is healthy and that he is out there. And when those opportunities come, there is a ruthlessness that has crept into Josh Sargent's game. Again, this is just in a club situation. We will see if he is able to translate it to the national team. But as I'm sure you're about to allude to, we are still in search of that person that on a continual basis is going to provide that ruthlessness up top from a U.S. men's national team perspective.
38 championship goals for Norwich by Josh Sargent. That's the most that any player has scored for a single club since Sargent made his debut in 2022. So he's been terrific for them. And you mentioned this search for a center forward. Once upon a time, Rob Stone proclaimed Daryl Dike that guy. I'll never forget that when he yelled that on the air. And obviously injuries have gotten in the way since then, but good to see him back on the field.
Yeah, so Daryl Dike makes his way back onto the field and, back into the hearts and minds of more than just Rob Stone, because the potential that Daryl Dike has, and certainly had, we'll see if he still has it, is relative to bringing something different, a different type of dimension to that number 9 striker position. And when he first burst on the scene, it was, oh my God, look out. This is a guy who is a steamroller type of player, and in a much more traditional type of sense, hold-up type of player, uses his size really, really well, certainly has a touch and can finish. But to your point, while the injuries derailed him, if he comes back in the mix, he provides a different look for Pochettino up top. And I think we're a long way from there, but knock on wood, he continues to grow and stays healthy, because adding him to the mix, and, we are so desperate as American fans for somebody to do that. That's why the Brandon Vasquez of the world, we get lit up and in an excited fashion look at these players. And so fingers crossed, the return of Daryl Dike makes him back in the mix, but I'll believe it when I see it.
We know Ricardo Pepi is out for the season.
Yep.
Dest and Tillman sidelined as well. But an American shined against PSV in the Eredivisie this past weekend. Paxton Aaronson got one of the goals for Utrecht in their 2-2 draw away to PSV. He becomes the third youngest American to reach 10 career Eredivisie goals, behind only Ricardo Pepi and Michael Bradley.
So, yeah, I mean, Paxton Aaronson, obviously of the Aaronson clan, hasn't gotten as much attention as his brother, and yet I find ourselves over the last few months and over the last year starting to talk about him more. I don't know if he is legit relative to the U.S. men's national team yet, and I don't know if he's ever going to be. But so far, so good, and certainly it has to be said, if you're looking to score goals in the game of soccer, Holland's a good place, and it has been traditionally over the years.
Utrecht in third place, PSV in second. They've been surpassed by Ajax. Quite the race in the Eredivisie.
This Ajax team coming on strong. Evidently, they're pretty good. So we'll see if order has kind of been restored when it comes to Ajax back on top over there, and how long that lasts.
We go to Germany next. Borussia Dortmund's struggles continue. They suffered a 2-0 defeat away to last place Bochum. Gio Reyna was the fifth and final sub for Dortmund. He came on in the 80th minute.
Well, I have a question for you and a question for our viewers and our listeners out there. Has there ever been an American player who has elicited more angst and excuses and ultimately, I guess, belief from American soccer fans, and I include myself in that group, than Gio Reyna? And I guess, answering my own question, I don't think there is, but I think that is actually a testament to just how talented we have, and I think still continue to believe he is. But is he worthy of this? Because I put this out on the old X machine out there, and I was interested to hear many of the responses of people that say, no, he's not worthy of this. And some of it gets into the personal situation with him and his family, all that kind of stuff. I've kind of moved past that. But just looking at it from a soccer perspective, if our hopes and dreams and all of that support that we have put behind Gio Reyna, had we put it behind somebody else, where do you think that would be? And ultimately, I guess the question goes back to, do you think that Gio Reyna is worth it?
I do. He is that talented. He provides a different level of vision and touch that I don't think most other U.S. players have. So I understand all the angst. There has to be some club at a decent level somewhere in the world where this kid can go to and play regularly. It's nuts to me that he's stuck in this situation. But yeah, I agree with you. It's remarkable. And
yeah, I mean, he has been given the benefit of the doubt time after time after, because there will be other players having gone through the same situation that we or American soccer fans would have just said, maybe it's just not that good. Maybe it's his attitude. Maybe what he was given too much at an early age. And I know when I asked that question, I got a few Freddie Adu responses. Now, the Freddie Adu phenomenon was not just relative to the talent that he had, but the talent that he had at a young age, at 14. So I think it's an apples and oranges type of comparison. I would disagree with anybody that throws Freddie Adu. And yes, we had belief and hope, but it very, very quickly became apparent relative to Freddie Adu that he wasn't everything that the hype machine had made him out to be. And certainly since has been proven that. But at one point, Gio Reyna, it has to be on you. And when I say you, I mean Gio Reyna, to fix the situation, whether it's the changing of a team or ultimately when you are at a team, whether it's here or anyplace else, you got to do what needs to be done to be worthy of all of the support. And when all is said and done, Gio Reyna can never say, despite the difficulties that we went through and all the craziness, that he hasn't been supported by a lot of people. And like I said, been given the benefit of the doubt.
Now, Dortmund are home to Sporting in the Champions League with a 3-0 aggregate lead. So in theory, that is a chance for Niko Kovac to rotate and get a look at some different players. It actually would not shock me if Gio Reyna pops up in the starting lineup of this match coming up.
I mean, at this point, You'll take it where you can get it, right?
Yeah. Staying in Germany, the big one this past weekend, top of the table clash, Leverkusen and Bayern played to a 0-0 draw. Despite Leverkusen completely dominating the match, they outshot them 15-2, hit the post twice, but it stays an 8-point advantage for Bayern. It does look like they're going to win the Bundesliga this season. Interestingly enough, though, they have not beaten Leverkusen this season. They drew both Bundesliga meetings and lost them in the German Cup, and they could face them in the round of 16 of the Champions League. If Bayern get past Celtic this week, it would be either Atletico Madrid or Leverkusen for them in the next round.
Yeah, I watched this game, and to your point, if you didn't know the score, you would have say, "Oh my goodness, there's one team playing." But ultimately, it's bogey team, whatever you want to call it. There is something that comes over Leverkusen when they are playing against Bayern that they can't quite get it together. Now, they're still a very, very good team. To your point, they're not going to win the Bundesliga again. But do you think that this was just one of those days, or do you think that Bayern, in a sense, is in Leverkusen's head?
Well, the other way around. I think Leverkusen, to play 3 games against Bayern over the course of a season and have a win and 2 draws in those 3 games, I think it's impressive.
But from today, from that game.
Yeah, that was a frustrating one because they played well enough to win that match comfortably. And so you could say they came up small in that sense that they didn't put the ball in the back of the net. But you don't think that what
Leverkusen is looking at this as anything other than an outlier, especially with the potential of some games in the future?
Yes.
I take their chances.
I think they would step on the field more confident against Bayern than Bayern would be against them. Well, Bayern first have to get past Celtic. They're at home this week with a 2-1 aggregate lead. Austin Trusty got an assist for Celtic this past weekend against Dundee United, but I think this is probably it for Celtic. They'll go out here, right?
Okay, yep.
By the way, on the topic of Bayern and the Champions League, quick correction. On our last pod, I said Bayern lost 4 of 8 in the league phase. It was actually 3 of 8. Good catch by a listener. But the overall point I was making is that I haven't been that impressed with Vincent Kompany's work this season, and I think the performance against Leverkusen this past weekend added weight to that.
Well, you made a mistake, Mosse. Please step it up, please.
You know who I blame for that? Stu Holden. It's a little too loose with him. You're more of a disciplinarian. I say you keep me on my toes.
Mm-hmm.
You're more of the Bob Knight approach to the podcast. So.
No, I don't think I could lift this chair, though. Oh, boy, that's an old reference.
By the way, I said if Bayern advanced, they would face either Atletico Madrid or Leverkusen next round. The other 2 teams in that quadrant are Real Madrid and Manchester City. Whoever advances from that tie will get either Atletico Madrid or Leverkusen in the round of 16. That tie concludes at the Bernabeu this week. Real Madrid with a 3-2 aggregate lead. Remember, Jude Bellingham scored the winner at the Etihad last week, but he had himself an interesting weekend in La Liga. He got sent off in the first half of Real Madrid's 1-1 draw away to Osasuna. It evidently was some sort of misunderstanding between him and the official. This has become, frankly, kind of a ridiculous story. So the referee thinks that Jude Bellingham said F you to him, but Jude Bellingham alleges that he said F off, which is very different because to the English way of thinking, F off is not nearly as aggressive as F you. I mean, what do you make of this?
Yeah, I would think that in the EPL, if a player was sent off every time he said F off, there would be no players left at the end of the first half. It is, in the parlance, it's just back and forth, and there is no offense or disrespect necessarily taken. The FU you get into because it's much more directed. It's much more personal. And so I do think that there is a lost in translation type of situation here. I remember, Mosse, when I played down in Ecuador for Emelec, the first game I walked on the field, and obviously I'm in a Spanish-speaking country and in a Spanish-speaking league predominantly, and the referee did something, and I said, hijo de, you know what, right? And in my mind, it was, just an FU type of thing that would be water off a duck's back for any referee that I had encountered. And immediately I got thrown out of the game. That was it. It was done. And so I think you have to be very, very careful that it's not lost in translation. And that's on me, by the way. And that's on Bellingham or anybody else, in that you are a guest and you are in a different country and culture. And it goes back to something we were talking about earlier in the pod. It's not even just a lost in translation thing. It's that you, in this case, it would be as an English player, in my case, it would be as an American player, are doing it. And so it takes greater weight because referees, I'm here to tell you, they're actually humans. And with all the baggage and history and bias that comes with humans. And so their ability to take offense at something is heightened even by who is doing it. So in this case, like I said, an English player doing it to the referee, in my case, an American player doing referee. Now, I think that this will all get solved one way or the other. They're talking about 12 games or something stupid like that, but that's never going to happen.
Sounds like Rudiger might be back for Real Madrid for the second leg. That's big. On the topic of Manchester City, I'm fascinated by these club versus country dynamics. A lot of Egyptians have adopted Liverpool as their favorite club because of Mo Salah.
Sure, makes sense.
Well, now Man City have a prominent Egyptian player. They signed this Omar Marmoush in January from Frankfurt. He bagged a hat trick this past weekend against Newcastle, and there were Egyptian Liverpool fans celebrating that, and then fellow Liverpool fans got mad at them and said, wait a minute, why are you happy a Man City player scored a hat trick? You purport to be a Liverpool fan. They said, well, wait a minute, I'm an Egyptian, though, so I'm happy another Egyptian player's doing well. It's tricky, huh?
There we go. Makes complete sense in my American mind. If there was an American that was doing great things for Liverpool, and I was a Liverpool fan, and then there was an American that was doing great things for Man City, of course I would celebrate that. Absolutely. I mean, it's your countryman that's doing something great. And I get that it would be a group that would look at that as, no, you can't possibly do that. No, absolutely. And it highlights, again, the globalization of the PL and the way that teams are using players to attract more audience or different audience out there. So don't be surprised when this thing happens where you are a fan of a team relative to the players, and then specifically relative to the nationality of the players, as opposed to the actual team. I mean, look, we talk about this all the time on the State of the Union. We talk about how I'm a fan of Juventus and AC Milan because there are Americans that are playing there. So it should be no surprise that the Egyptians are excited and ultimately proud, because this comes down to pride, that one of their own is starring for many years at a Liverpool capacity and now from a Manchester City.
Sean Sullivan deals with this when Pulisic plays against his beloved Bologna, so he knows what these Egyptians are going through. On this side of the pond, the CONCACAF Champions Cup is off and running. Lots of American clubs in action this week. We thought we were going to have two all-MLS matchups on Tuesday, Colorado facing LAFC, and then Sporting KC hosting Inter Miami. And the big story leading up to this match was the forecast in Kansas City on Tuesday. Frigid temperatures, snow, and Messi evidently didn't want to play in those conditions, so there were all sorts of questions about his involvement in this match. And we've come to find out today, it's now, the game's been postponed a day. It'll be on Wednesday. The forecast not as bad for that day. So a lot of people think this is Messi related. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, so a couple of things. That Messi would complain about playing in the cold, I think everybody can say, well, tough, right? Again, suck it up, Buttercup. You're going to be fine. If you're not, that's your problem. You play in the United States, and the North and the South, there's a lot of difference when it comes to the weather. And somebody, I don't know, maybe somebody from up north would say, I don't want to play in the ridiculous heat down there in Miami. And you would say the same thing to him. Now, to defend Messi, and I don't think he necessarily even knew the situation, this is a historic, I think, and record type of freeze that is happening right there. My daughter goes to school in upstate New York, and as we're recording this, she was telling me that there's no school today, and that's a big deal. So there is a recognition that it has gotten to or bordering on, I guess, dangerous types of conditions for anybody, even for the locals up there. And again, this is just a 24-hour delay. Ultimately, Messi and company are going to have to endure a very cold game. Remains to be seen whether he is going to, but put on some long johns and some gloves, and let's see what you got.
Also this week, RSL, Cincinnati, Seattle, and Vancouver in action. Two other MLS teams, the Galaxy and Columbus, have byes until the round of 16. Columbus will face the winner of the Colorado LAFC tie in the round of 16, while the Galaxy would play Seattle. If Seattle get past, they're facing a Guatemalan team. So, yeah, the CONCACAF Champions Cup percolating. All those matches are on Fox Sports.
Well, there's a lot going on. Like I said, we'll talk a whole lot more on Wednesday's show about MLS and the season, which is upon us. But just a quick thing, because it goes to what you're saying. There's a lot of soccer going on right now. There will be even more as MLS kicks off this week and then into the beginning of the season on the weekend. And they're actually going to have a Sunday standalone game. And I can't tell you the amount of times that me and others, I've gotten texts from people saying, boy, really could use a soccer game about now. And, it's kind of like comfort food for a lot of us that are into soccer. And when it's not there is this incredible void. So, the more soccer, the better, as we talked about at the top of the show, and that they are finding some windows out there to give us soccer in those voids is a good thing going forward. So get ready. Lots of soccer, whether it's domestic or around the world. It's going to be fun. Anything else before we go, Mosse?
That's it.
All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, it's time for Ask Alexi. Okay, welcome back. It's time for Ask Alexi, that part of the show where you send in your comments, questions, and concerns. And keep in mind that our handle out there on the old social media platforms is SOTU with Alexi. Or you can call into our State of the Union podcast hotline, which is 657-549-2297. 657-549-2297. And use that hashtag AskAlexi out there. Mosse, what do the folks want to know today?
First up, a question on X. Douglas Q asks, what's a bigger rivalry, U.S. versus Mexico in soccer or U.S. versus Canada in hockey? Now, what he's alluding to is the NHL this year, in lieu of an all-star game, instead have organized this 4-team international tournament with the U.S., Canada, Finland, and Sweden, which is going on right now. On Saturday, the U.S. and Canada met in Montreal. This is occurring, of course, against the backdrop of Donald Trump talking about annexing Canada and turning it into the 51st state. So Canadian fans booed the U.S. anthem. It was a very spicy atmosphere. There were fights. The U.S. prevailed 3-1. Although it looks like the two teams could meet again Thursday in the final in Boston, which would be fun. But everybody was jacked up for this on Saturday night, including you. You were posting about it on social media. We've talked about how U.S., Mexico, and soccer has these political undertones.
Yep.
U.S., Canada has always just been kind of a fun, good-natured sporting rivalry. But now, with everything going on in the world, it looks like U.S., Canada is going that way as well.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting question Douglas Q over there is asking. And I think because of the history when it comes to hockey in the United States and Canada, and let's be honest, a much more robust and longer history when it comes to what the game has meant relative to soccer in the United States. When it comes to hockey, the history and the relevance and the organization and the structure and the money and the professional game and all that kind of stuff, the infrastructure, ice rinks and all that kind of stuff is very different relative to soccer. And we have a historical touchstone when it comes to the Olympic win back in 1980 that resonates even for people that weren't even alive back then. They know that. But we haven't had a moment like we had the other night, and it looks like we're going to have another opportunity come later on in this week, and with the political situation. But what would be interesting is, remember back in 2002, one of the great victories in American World Cup history was 2-0, beating Mexico at the World Cup. Now, it happened in the middle of the night, and it happened in a very different time and era. Given, you mentioned what Trump is doing relative to Canada, given where we are right now with Mexico, if this summer, or let's say in 2026, the U.S. were to play Mexico in a World Cup, I think that would have exponentially more attention and cultural relevance than what we saw the other night. So I guess that's a long way of saying I still think U.S.-Mexico, from a soccer perspective in a soccer world, is a bigger rivalry than US-Canada in a hockey sense. And the pendulum that has swung and the gap that we talk about relative to who wins in US-Mexico has dramatically changed and made it much more equal than US-Canada, I would venture to say. But who knows? That pendulum could have swung starting the other night and go back the other way.
I mentioned we could have a Canada-US rematch on Thursday. We're taping this on Monday afternoon. Canada is thumping Finland as we speak, which could potentially set up that rematch, much to the delight of our director, Gabe, who is Canadian, who's watching the game right now. So if this podcast is poorly directed, it's because he has one eye on that hockey game. He wants another shot at the U.S. He is smarting from that.
And it sounds like they're going to get it. And this is my fear, Mosse, is that we are going to lose the battle or win the battle and lose the war. Because giving Canada 2 bites at the apple, it could be a problem. But listen, if it ends up being US-Canada in the final, and then America goes and wins again, this game's going to be in Boston, by the way. I mean, shut it down, right? I mean, close up shop when it comes to Canada.
By the way, putting all this political stuff aside, although we should mention today is President's Day on the topic of Donald.
And I know you're a big president guy. For people who've watched and listened.
I believe it was President's Day last year where I rattled off all the U.S. presidents in order.
It's incredible.
But putting all this aside, we know all these different leagues in the United States are grappling with what to do with their all-star games, all-star weekends. And to me, the NHL came up with something great here. This has been phenomenal. I'm sure you have people in your life, I do in mine, that aren't really soccer fans, but get into World Cups because the pageantry of international competition reels them in. And I felt that this past week, and a lot of people who aren't hockey fans were very into this US-Canada game. So, I know the NBA All-Star Weekend was a disaster. I don't know what the heck they've done with that. So now Giannis is out there saying, hey, maybe we should do a USA versus the world type deal.
Gee, you think? Yeah, I mean, your nation and nationalism, I guess it would be in a positive sense. Yeah, it sells. People want to get behind their country. People want to celebrate their country. And I think that people want and are desperate for something to bring everybody together for at least in that couple of hours to be able to throw it away and not think about the differences that we have and celebrate, in this case, what I feel is the greatest country in the world. So, yeah, I think it's a no-brainer. The more the better. We saw it a couple years ago when they did that baseball thing, right? Everybody went crazy for the baseball thing. So, yeah, nations in sports sell.
Second question on X. Moses asks, can we talk about these MLS kit designs? I've seen some good ones, but the majority are trash. What's the deal with all that?
Okay, so real quick on this, because I'm not going to go through every single, and I call them jerseys. You can call them whatever you want. I call them jerseys, have since I was a kid. There are new jerseys. They come out every single year. Multiple of them come out every single year. They are designed to get you to buy them. There are all sorts of stories, and they pay a lot of people a lot of money to come up with these incredible PowerPoints and TED Talks about what they represent. Ultimately, it's an aesthetic. You either like it or you don't. I don't think that anybody's ever bought one because of the story that the marketing group has come up behind it. It either looks good or it doesn't. I really like 2 of them. I'm not going to get into all of them, but I really think that the RSL checker, whatever it is, I thought they did a really good job on that. And then I'll still say, the pink that Inter Miami embraced coming into this league, it still, literally resonates. I know exactly who is playing when they are on the field, and I think the new one that they have, it's still not as pink as I would like, and each year I say this, they need to lean even more into the pink. But the Inter Miami and RSL ones are the ones that I like. It is not an exact science, but each and every year it is a thing, and not just for MLS, obviously, for all leagues and for all sports out there when they come out with these things. It's a huge part of the business. They don't want you wearing last year's version. They want you to buy the new version, which is why they often sometimes go in various different directions and make it different. The yellow of Brazil, if you want, has stayed pretty constant in what they have done. I know there's the Brazil, but let's be honest, they're mostly associated with the yellow. But they want you buying the latest version, and so they will tweak it to the extent that they can, or go in completely different directions. So it is a one-off, unique type of thing going forward. But I think in general, they did a good job. It irks me sometimes when people go with colors that they aren't ever associated with, because I can't see on the screen actually who it is. And if you are associated with the color, and by the way, if you literally talk about yourself relative to that color, the reds, the blues, whatever it ends up being, and then you're not that color, something's wrong. Anything else, Mosse?
That is it.
All right, let's take another quick break. When we come back, we'll finish up our show and give you my one for the road. Okay, by the sound and sight of the van, it means it's the end of our show and my one for the road here. And at the end of each and every show, I do give you my one for the road. And thank you again, as always, to Stu Holden for filling in for me the last show last week. I was on the road. I was in Syracuse, New York, freezing my ass up there in Syracuse, New York. You may know, and many of our listeners and viewers know, that Syracuse, when it comes to broadcasting, is legendary. You know, the likes of Mike Tirico and Bob Costas, and the list goes on and on. People in front of the camera, behind the camera. The Newhouse School that they have over there is legendary, and I was nice enough to be invited to come and speak there. And it was wonderful. It was wonderful. There were a couple of different forums that we were in. One was more general, talking about the broadcast industry, and a lot of them had questions about what we're going to do with the World Cup and all of that. Now, this was all organized by Fox U, which is Fox University. We go around to different universities, and we basically do a semester-long project. Now, when it came to the students that are in the Fox U program for Syracuse University, the ask was, what would you do from a Fox perspective to sell the 2026 World Cup? And I appeared at Syracuse with a good friend of mine that we know works behind the scenes here at Fox, named Ben Grossman. And he was very smart in that he prefaced the project and talking about the project with, don't tell me to sell Messi, okay? And what he was trying to say is, don't give us things that are obvious. A lot of people that are soccer fans are going to watch. Soccer fans in general are going to watch the World Cup. How do we get people that aren't necessarily soccer fans or haven't watched the World Cup in the past? How do we get them into the tent? How do we get them excited? What are some of the things that we can do? And these, very smart men and women who, like I said, some want to be in front of the camera, some want to be behind the camera. They are tasked with going about finding ways and creative ways to do that. So much so that if they come up with good stuff, we will most definitely use it. Now, we have wonderful men and women here who are in charge with selling the game through what we are doing with Fox, and selling the World Cup with what we are doing with Fox. But it was just fun for me to be there and to see these young men and women and the way that they think about not just television and not just broadcast, but let's expand it out to what we are doing here, in the digital world and the podcast world, and all of the different things that are going on, and how their business and even what their Newhouse School traditionally has looked at is changing day by day and year by year as the industry changes, and how they need to adapt and they need to evolve in this new world that we are going about. And so, thank you first off to Syracuse for bringing me in. And thank you to all of the students that I got to talk to. Some, like I said, are already well on their way to broadcast careers. I even talked to a young man who does soccer. And then some that are thinking about it differently and will be the brains and the organization that we have and have had for a long time behind the scenes that are making us look good when it comes to what happens on camera. And some, maybe like the great David Mosse, that are smart enough and talented enough to do both things.
Well, as you know, you have to have gone to USC to work on this pod. So those Syracuse grads are out of luck. No, but shout out to my buddy Adam Levinson, Syracuse Newhouse grad. I'm going to send him a picture of you there. He'll get a kick out of that. Had to be a big thrill for the kids to meet Ben Grossman.
Well, yes. He is the brains of a lot that goes on here. We can cut that out, right? Okay.
Yeah. Now, Alexa, I said I was going to save something towards the end.
You teased at the beginning of the show that you had watched so much that it wasn't even going to be able to be contained in the open.
I think you'll be into this.
Okay.
I did go see this past weekend the Led Zeppelin documentary, Becoming Led Zeppelin.
Oh my goodness. And
it was great. It has sent me down a Led Zeppelin rabbit hole. I've been listening nonstop the last few days.
Now, beforehand, were you a Led Zeppelin fan? Other than what you know is ubiquitous, right?
Just knew,
you knew
Stairway to Heaven, the big hits.
Oh my God. So now you're into it.
Oh, phenomenal. I know they're one of your favorites, right?
Oh, I love Led Zeppelin. I can tell you exactly where I was, and this would have been in the 70s, and I went next door to the Carter's house, and Tommy Carter, who was older than me, and his older brothers that were obviously were older than him. I mean, it was like, if you've ever watched that 70s show, it was like the basement of that 70s show, and they had like the Rolling Stone lips painted in the basement, and it was the ultimate like 70s rock and roll grotto. And I can tell you the moments that the needle hit the groove and Whole Lotta Love was played for me for the first time, and it blew my mind and changed my world forever. So I'm glad that you are totally into it. I have not seen the document. I've seen plenty of documentaries, but I have not seen this one, which evidently is very, very good.
Rank these 4 bands:
Okay.
Beatles, Rolling Stones, The Who, Led Zeppelin.
Beatles, Rolling Stones. So it would be Beatles, Beatles, Led Zeppelin, Stones, Who. And I even might switch the Who and Stones, but yeah, that would be it. So I'd still put Beatles at the top. Yeah, then the Stones, then Zeppelin, then Rolling Stones, and then the Who.
I know we're going long here, but a couple of other musical notes. Kendrick Lamar, fresh off his Super Bowl halftime performance, has announced some UK tour dates. He'll perform in July at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, also Villa Park, also Hampden Park in Glasgow. So Kendrick Lamar is going to be busy this summer.
Will he be playing all the hits that we saw during the Super Bowl?
I imagine, yes.
Okay.
Also, Michigan Stadium is going to start holding concerts for the first time. The very first one in September, Zach Bryan.
Really?
It's sold out in just 2.5 hours, 112,000 people.
Why did
big house?
Why didn't they do it before? Oh, because they didn't want to mess up isn't it turf there or whatever? So they just didn't want to do it. It was sacrilege.
Yeah, it was sacrilege. But now you need that additional revenue for NIL.
You got to pay those players, right? Oh my goodness. All right. Anything else, Mosse?
That's it.
All right. Well, thank you to everybody. And thank you to everybody here for adjusting when it comes to the set. There will be some continual adjustments as we go on, like we mentioned. Thanks to everybody for downloading and reviewing and rating and subscribing and doing all the different things that you do out there, including smashing that button left and right, up and down when it comes to the old YouTube. Smash it. Smash that button. We'll talk to you again later on this week. As we mentioned, we'll do a little preview of the 30th season of MLS later on this week. That starts this weekend when it comes to MLS. We'll talk to you then. And until then, and as always, my friends, size the day.